God, I want to trust you again, but I'm afraid. Trusting God is not the hardest thing you'll ever do. Going back to trusting God, after you already trusted Him and things still fell apart, that is the hardest thing. And if that's where you are right now, this is for you. Maybe you don't even have words for what happened. Maybe you just know that somewhere along the way, something broke. And the part of you that used to hand things over to God, that part got quiet. Not because you stopped believing, but because believing started to feel dangerous. You're here today because you want to trust again, and you're afraid to. I want you to know, by the time we finish this together, you're not going to have all your questions answered. I'm not going to promise you that. But I believe something is going to shift, because there's a difference between understanding what God is doing and choosing to walk with Him anyway. And that difference, that's what we're going to find today. I know this place you're in. Not because someone told me about it, because I lived in it. There was a season in my life when I had prayed and waited and trusted, and things still came apart. And I remember sitting in the silence after thinking, I don't know if I can do this again. That was the most honest prayer I ever prayed. And it turned out to be the one that started everything. Let's go into this together. Before we go into this, just one quick thing. If this is the kind of message you need, subscribe to the channel. I post a new prayer or message every single day, and some days you're going to need one. And if this one already found you at the right moment, a like helps someone else who needs it today find it too. Okay, let's begin. I want to take you back to something. Not to a lesson, not yet. Just to a moment. A real one. It was a Tuesday morning, early, maybe 5:45, 6 o'clock. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that was still too hot to drink. The house was quiet. Everyone else was still asleep. And I remember the light coming through the window, that particular kind of morning light that makes everything feel like it has a chance. I was 32 years old, and I prayed every morning. Not because I was especially disciplined, but because somewhere along the way it had become the thing that made the rest of the day feel like it had a foundation. I'd sit there before the phone, before the noise, before the work, and I'd just talk to God. Sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 5. But it was there. Every day. It was there. And here's what I remember most about that season. I never questioned whether God was listening. I'd pray, and there was this quiet sense that I was being held. Not that everything was easy. It wasn't. But there was a thread. Something underneath the day that I trusted was there even when I couldn't see it. That was my relationship with God at 32. Present, simple, almost effortless, if I'm honest. What made what came later so hard wasn't just the pain, it was the contrast. I knew what it felt like to trust easily. And when that ease disappeared, I didn't know what I was supposed to do with what was left. I was 35 when everything started to shift. Not all at once, it happens in a season. Slowly, then all at once. The work had changed. What used to feel like purpose started to feel like pressure. And somewhere in the middle of trying to keep up, I stopped sitting at that kitchen table in the morning. I just started reaching for the phone first. And the quiet that used to be the foundation of my day got smaller and smaller until one morning I realized it was gone. I kept telling myself, when this season passes, I'll return. The season didn't pass. The prayers that did happen felt different. Thin, like words going up and hitting a ceiling. I'd say the right things. I'd open my Bible, but there was no sense of being heard. Just silence on the other end of something I used to know was open. And then came the morning I couldn't get up. It was a Saturday. No alarm, no reason to rush. And I lay there staring at the ceiling, unable to move. Not physically sick, just empty. The anxiety had been building for months, and that morning it had weight. Real physical weight on my chest. I tried to pray. I genuinely tried, and nothing came out. And what scared me, more than the emptiness, was this thought that surfaced almost like a whisper. I trusted you. and things still fell apart. I didn't say it out loud. I barely let myself think it. But it was there. And once it was there, I couldn't unknow it. That was the first time I understood that I wasn't just tired. I was afraid. Afraid that if I reached for God again and felt nothing again, I wouldn't know what to do. So instead of reaching, I went quiet. And that's the first thing I want to stop and share with you. I had spent years confusing two things that are not the same. I had confused the feeling of God's presence with trust in God. What I had was something closer to comfort. And comfort is a gift. I'm not saying it isn't. But comfort is not the same as trust. Comfort depends on the feeling still being there. Trust has to work when the feeling is gone. There's a line in Psalm 56 I had read probably 100 times without really hearing it. When I am afraid, I will trust in you. For years I read that as a sequence. First the fear, then the trust, and the trust makes the fear go away. But that's not what it says. It says when I am afraid, not after I stop being afraid, I will trust. The trust and the fear exist at the same time. The psalmist isn't describing a moment of victory. He's describing a choice made inside the fear. The feeling is not the signal. If you've built your sense of God's presence on top of a feeling, the feeling will eventually shift. And when it does, it will feel like God shifted. And that's when the fear of trusting starts. The reach comes first. The feeling, if it comes after. The choice to reach is itself the trust. And the story wasn't done. Months passed, and I kept going through the motions. Church sometimes, prayers out of habit, the kind of spiritual life that looks okay from the outside but feels hollow from the inside. And then one night, everything shifted. Not because something good happened, because something finally broke. It was late, maybe 11:30. I'd been lying in bed for an hour, unable to sleep, running the same loop in my head. At some point I got up. I just couldn't stay horizontal anymore. I went and sat on the floor. Not the couch, not a chair. The floor. It just felt right, like I needed to be low. And I sat there in the dark, exhausted, out of words, out of effort. And then something surfaced with a clarity that stopped me cold. You've been afraid to come back because you're afraid to be disappointed again. It was true. I hadn't been distant from God because I was too busy or too broken. I had been distant because I was protecting myself. I had trusted things had hurt, and some part of me had quietly decided, I am not doing that again. That was the real obstacle, not the burnout, not the anxiety, the fear of being hurt by hope. And I said the most honest thing I had said to God in years. Out loud, in the dark, sitting on the floor. God, I want to trust you again, but I'm afraid. That was it. That was the whole prayer. The room didn't change. Nothing lit up, but something in me, something that had been braced for a very long time, went quiet. Not the silence of absence. Something else. And that's what I want to share with you now. Here's what I had believed my entire life without ever saying it out loud. That fear and faith were opposites. That the goal was to get to a place where the fear was gone, and then I could trust God fully. That night on the floor, I found out that was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Completely wrong. When I said I'm afraid, that wasn't a failure of faith. That was the most honest thing I had brought to God in years. And what I felt in the silence after wasn't God waiting for me to do better. It was something closer to recognition, like I had finally shown up as I actually was. The prayer, God, I want to trust you again, but I'm afraid, is not a weak prayer. It is one of the most courageous prayers a person can pray, because you're coming exactly as you are, broken, scared, uncertain, and you're saying, I'm here anyway. That is not the opposite of faith. That is faith. If you've been waiting to resolve the fear before coming back to God, you may be waiting for something God never asked you to bring. He didn't say come when the fear is gone. He said come. The fear can come with you. The doubt, the anger, the exhaustion, all of it can come. You don't have to be okay to come to God. You just have to come. Before I tell you how the rebuilding looked, just one moment. If what I just shared landed somewhere real in you, I want you to know there's something I put together specifically for moments like this one. It's called 30 Days of Faith, a guided prayer devotional. 30 days of prayers and reflections, written and narrated by me, for people who are somewhere in the middle. Not on the other side yet, just beginning to find their way back. Every day starts exactly where you actually are. The link is in the description below. Okay, let's keep going. So I want to tell you what I actually did, not what I think you should do, what I did. The first thing I changed was the order of the morning. Before the phone, before coffee, I sat, just sat. Not with a plan, not with a list, just present. And I said something simple, sometimes just, God, here we are again. That was the whole prayer some mornings. It didn't feel like much at first, but I had learned something from that night on the floor. The feeling wasn't the signal, so I kept going anyway. The second thing I did was start being honest in the prayers instead of correct. After the floor, when I was angry, I said I was angry. When I didn't understand what God was doing, I said that too. I don't understand this. I don't know where you are in this. And more often than not, something would loosen. The third thing was asking one question when the anxiety spiked. If I were trusting God right now, what would I do? Not what would fix everything, just the next right thing. And then I'd do that one thing. Slowly, over weeks, not days, the thread started coming back. Not the same thread as before. Something newer, less dependent on the feeling being there. But there's something about that season I need to tell you. The part nobody usually says. Rebuilding trust with God after it's been broken is not a straight line. Nobody told me that. And because nobody told me, when I regressed, when the fear came back, I thought it meant I hadn't really changed, that I was back to zero. I wasn't back to zero. But I didn't know that. Isaiah says, I will strengthen you, not I will make this quick, not I will make this comfortable. Strengthen, which implies resistance, which implies weight pushing back. The honest timeline for me was closer to a year, with setbacks inside that year that felt like starting over, but weren't. When the fear comes back, and it will, it does not mean your prayer wasn't real. It does not mean God left again. It means you're human. A setback is not a verdict. It's just the next moment that asks you to make the choice again. And the choice gets easier. With enough mornings of God, here we are again. The distance between the setback and the return gets shorter. Nobody told me the prayer I said half-heartedly on a Tuesday when I felt nothing was still counted, still real, still heard. I'm telling you now. It's not failure, it's just Wednesday. And Thursday comes after. About a year after that night on the floor, I was sitting at the kitchen table again. Early morning. Coffee still too hot, and I realized I hadn't noticed when it changed. No finish line, no moment of declaration. It had shifted gradually, the way your eyes adjust to light. The anxiety hadn't disappeared. There were still hard days, but my relationship to all of it had changed. Before the floor, when anxiety came, it carried a second layer, the fear that God wasn't there, that my prayers weren't reaching, that I was alone. That second layer was sometimes worse than the thing itself. That layer was gone. What I have now is different from what I had at 32. At 32, I trusted God the way you trust something you've never needed to question. What I have now is something I had to choose, again and again, on good days and bad ones. And that kind of trust has a weight to it the easy faith didn't. Not with perfection, with something better, a trust that was chosen, not assumed. A God who was there on the floor at 11:30 at night when I had nothing left, who worked with 7 words when that's all I had. So let me show you what to take from all of this. Your situation is probably different from mine. Maybe it wasn't burnout. Maybe it was a loss, an unanswered prayer, a season that lasted longer than you thought you could survive. The details are different, but something in you recognizes the feeling. 3 things. Not as a list to complete, as a way of seeing. First, stop waiting to feel ready. The trust doesn't come before the reach. It comes because of it. The act of turning toward God even when everything feels uncertain, that is the thing. You don't have to feel it first. You just have to move. Second, your most honest prayer is your most powerful one. Whatever you're actually carrying right now, the doubt, the anger, the fear of being disappointed again, that's what you bring. God, I want to trust you again, but I'm afraid. That's a complete prayer. That's enough. Third, a setback is not a verdict. When the fear comes back, it's not telling you that you haven't changed. It's telling you that you're human. The only thing a setback asks is the same thing the floor asked. Come back. Not perfectly, just back. If you only take one thing from today, let it be this. Go to God with the real thing, not the version of yourself you think He wants to see, the one that's actually there. That version, that's the one that gets to come. That's always been the one that gets to come. And now, I want us to bring all of this to God together. Before we close, I want to say something. You stayed, through the whole story, through the hard parts. That means something. If today opened something in you, and you want to keep moving in that direction, the 30 days of faith, a guided prayer, devotional is 30 days of exactly this. For people somewhere in the middle of the journey, every day starts where you are. The link is in the description. And if this message found you at the right moment, share it. You probably know someone carrying exactly what we talked about today. Send it to them. Leave something in the comments if today stirred something in you. This community of people finding their way back to God, it's real and your words are part of it. Thank you for being here. Now, let's pray.